Chapter 141. Hearing the other party's words, Li Hao's eyes suddenly grew cold, and he also caught the information the other party mentioned, Great Wilderness Heaven? Wasn't his mother from a minor family? How could she be from the Great Wilderness Heaven? Being in the Li family and having always been in the company of chit-chat with second uncle, fifth uncle, and elder Feng since he was young, Li Hao had access to many top secrets, more than these third-generation youngsters. And the Great Wilderness Heaven was not exactly a well-kept secret either. Outside of the Dongwang continent, guarded by Dayu, in places never tread by the human race, where demons and monsters thrive, lies the Great Wilderness Heaven. It is said that the demons within the Great Wilderness Heaven are far fiercer and more terrifying than the ones around Dayu. The demons around Dayu were merely weak races driven from the Great Wilderness Heaven because they could not survive inside and were expelled to the outer edges. Deep within the Great Wilderness Heaven, ancient beasts roamed, and it was extremely terrifying, a place even those in the Four Stands realm would not tread lightly. To the people of this world, the Great Wilderness Heaven was like the sea during an age without technology, mysterious, dangerous, and boundlessly vast. You know about my mother? Li Hao stared at the other party. Li Rumeng raised an eyebrow and said, "What, didn't your father tell you?" "Oh, I forgot, you and your dad have been apart since you were young, and your dad probably couldn't bring himself to say it. After all, he is a savage barbarian." With a smack, Li Hao suddenly lashed out with a slap, and 5 bright red handprints appeared on Li Rumeng's face, causing her to bleed and a tooth to spill out. Li Hao. Next to him, Li Jiangying came to his senses, saw his sister beaten, and was furious. He glared at Li Hao with his soul manifestation emerging above his head. However, the heroic spirit he inherited was not of the Li family ancestors, but of the Wang family. Therefore, if he made a move against Li Hao, he wouldn't be breaking his heart oath. Yet his rage was forcefully suppressed under the icy gaze of Li Hao, and his poised body involuntarily clenched his teeth and stopped. Thinking about how this fierce man had nearly killed Li Qianfeng in public just now and disregarding Li Qianfeng's identity was also the direct disciple of the infinite Buddha Lord, yet he still wasn't taken seriously by Li Hao. He was bound to have no advantage if he struck, and at this moment there were no family elders to support him around. They had already run off to the Qinglian backyard. Li Mingguang saw Li Hao suddenly make a move, caught off guard, and considering that Li Hao's slap was unimaginably fast, seemingly even faster than when he attacked Li Qianfeng before, he didn't react in time. But when he came to his senses, he was so enraged his eyes turned red. "Do you really think I wouldn't dare to lay a hand on you? If I knew it would come to this, I shouldn't have listened to mother. I should enter the competition for the true dragon of the Li family too." At this moment, Li Hao was not in the mood at all and coldly said, "If you want to compete, you must be qualified to compete. Don't talk as if you're letting it go." Li Mingguang was taken aback, somewhat at a loss for words. Li Hao's eyes coldly fixed on Li Rumeng. "Insult my mother again, and I will make you regret it for the rest of your life." Seeing Li Hao's terrifying gaze, the spoiled and arrogant Li Rumeng felt scared and grabbed her face in a mixture of anger and fright. Li Hao couldn't be bothered to question her about his mother's matters anymore. She probably knew because she heard it from her mother. Ms. Wang, he would ask his own father later, and even if Li Tiangang wouldn't tell him, he could still ask fifth uncle or second uncle. He would surely get a clear answer. The stories from before were probably all lies to deceive him. Thinking about this, Li Hao felt a surge of anger. Why was it that everyone else knew his mother was from the Great Wilderness Heaven, but he didn't? His eyes cold, he walked towards the Green Lotus courtyard. Those who wanted to cure Li Qianfeng, even if they succeeded, he would bring up the matter of the poison pill and have him publicly disabled. He wanted the second mother to witness with her own eyes as her deeply planned son would be completely wasted. Seeing the aura emanating from Li Hao, the expressions of everyone around changed and no one stopped him. They had originally come to question him, thinking that Li Hao would explain and repent, but instead he laid his cards on the table and stopped pretending. At this moment, they didn't know what else to say. Brother Hao Bian Rushue stood on the edge of the seat, stunned, watching that departing figure, feeling very unfamiliar, whether it was Li Hao standing up to her master or his ruthless actions just now. He was unlike the warm and welcoming figure she remembered. That figure never burdened his heart with anything and was always kind to everyone. But why watching Li Hao leave the courtyard? Ren Qianqian hurriedly followed with the black sword box in her arms. The girl's little head was still somewhat confused, unable to make sense of the situation as everything changed too abruptly, making her heart race. But the black sword box in her hands made her realize she was Li Hao's sword servant. A sword servant should not leave their master's side. In the Qinglian backyard, the godly doctor of the Li family was called for, appearing as an old man, also from Li Kingsheng's generation. But he was born of a concubine and had ordinary cultivation talent. However, his lineage was of medics amongst the relatives, producing descendants who were mostly medical practitioners, inheriting their skills for generations. Although he was a concubine's son, his status within the manor was quite high. At this moment, everyone gathered around Li Qianfeng, and the godly doctor Li Yurong was gripping her handkerchief tightly, her palms sweaty with nerves, her face flushed with anxiety, yet she dared not interrupt. He Jianlan and the other ladies stood by, their eyes full of concern, and none spoke a word. The quiet treatment finally ended, with the assistance of Lin Wujing and using divine medicine procured from the Li family's treasure trove. The stabbed left eye finally stopped bleeding without damaging the brain inside. Chapter 142. As for the eyeball's recovery, it would require Li Qianfeng to cultivate to the 3 immortal realms before regenerative abilities could heal the limb and allow the nerves inside the eyeball to regrow. Although the treatment process was fraught with danger, the outcome was ultimately good. Once the young man's eyeball was bandaged, everyone sighed in relief. The divine physician bowed and took his leave from Qin Hufang without asking any further questions. As the divine physician was leaving the courtyard, he happened to run into Li Hao, who asked, "Is he cured?" The elderly divine physician saw Li Hao's attire and recognized him as a direct descendant of the Li family. Not daring to neglect him and assuming he came out of concern for Li Qianfeng, he said with a smile, "The injury has been temporarily stabilized. The wound should fully scab over in a couple of days." Li Hao nodded. The bodhisattva of immeasurable mountain had acted too quickly, and he had not managed to inflict a deeper wound, knowing that such an injury was not much for the latter, even though an eyeball was ruined, hindering his field of vision somewhat. Given his talent, the probability of him cultivating to the immortal realm was extremely high. There was still the possibility of regeneration in the future. Inside the courtyard, once Li Qianfeng's wounds began to heal, Li Yurong hurriedly asked after him with concern, "Does it hurt? Can you see clearly? Were you hurt anywhere else?" A mother's affection was fully displayed, filled with genuine care and concern. Li Tiangang stood to the side, his face unsightly as if he had a thorn in his back, though Li Qianfeng's body had calmed down. The temporary stimulation of his primary meridian had severely drained him, leaving him feeling utterly weak, his face extraordinarily pallid. He looked towards his mother and said weakly, "Mother, I'm fine." Hearing her son's words, Li Yurong's tears could no longer be held back, falling in big drops, but she quickly dabbed them away with a handkerchief, turned her head sharply, and glared at Li Tiangang. Li Tiangang. Li Yurong was full of grief and anger. She normally referred to him affectionately as seventh brother or Marquis, but now she was calling him by his name, indicating the extent of her anger. "What a good son you've taught, how capable of teaching you are. Filled with wolfish ambitions, despite the care I've shown these years, simply ungrateful." The angry mother's words roared within the courtyard, leaving everyone speechless. Xie Feng went to the mountain to cultivate at the age of 6 and never returned to the estate. It was always me who went to the mountain to visit him. They were cousins meeting for the first time, just a first meeting, so where could there be any grudge? Yet to strike with such viciousness. Is it just for the true dragon's seat? Li Tiangang, if you want it, I'll give it to your son, so why provoke him to bully my son? Li Tiangang's face was unsightly and he had nothing to say, although he had not incited or taught him, but to not teach a child is the father's fault. Li Hao's mistakes were not something he could avoid. He had to accept responsibility. "Second sister-in-law, I will definitely give you and my brother an explanation," Li Tiangang said gravely with a storm of rage in his eyes. He Jianlin's expression changed slightly and she said, "Seventh brother, Hauer acted on impulse, perhaps due to lack of experience in facing an enemy. He wasn't measured in his actions. You should be more gentle." Li Yurong, tearful, cut He Jianlan off before she could finish, looking at her and saying, "Elder sister, have I ever offended you? Can my son's brush with death really be attributed to a mere act of impulsivity, an accident?" He Jianlin's face changed slightly, and faced with Lu Yurong's tearful and angry gaze, she chose to back down for the first time, offering no reply. "Elder sister." Now Li Tiangang also spoke. His gaze was terribly dark as he said, "Hao's outcome today is my fault, as I was not present to discipline him, allowing him the special treatment from everyone. Your indulgence, your protection, your affection, I understand. But if you are uncomfortable disciplining him, let me do it." With that, he turned and walked out of the courtyard. At that moment, Li Hao entered the courtyard. Father and son's gazes collided at that instant. "Unfilial son." The rage in Li Tiangang's eyes surged as he shouted, "Come and kneel, kowtow to your second aunt." Li Hao raised his eyebrows slightly. The misunderstanding from Li Mingguang and the others earlier had clued him in that others were also waiting for his explanation. He had come here for that very reason. Only he hadn't expected his father to be so furious. Let the second aunt come out then, and while you're at it, have grandfather and grandmother come out as well, to witness, said Li Hao, expressionless. Li Tiangang, taking it as a sign of his repentance, softened his angry expression slightly. He didn't need to go inside to inform the others as they were all making their way to the courtyard at that moment. Meanwhile, Li Mingguang, Bian Ruxue and others following behind also entered the courtyard, standing behind Li Hao. The courtyard was filled with Ms. Li and the direct descendants of the family. Uncle Li Xuanli and Uncle Li Fenghua were among them, their gazes complex as they watched Li Hao. They saw a shadow of Li Junyi in the star of the Li family and felt a sense of kinship. But Li Junyi would never lift a hand against his own kin. With everyone assembled, Li Hao looked to the mother and son. The second mother, who usually feigned affection toward him with smiles, now bore no guise, her face full of anger and hatred. But in that moment, no one thought her rage and hatred were misplaced. Li Hao sneered, "Second mother, the karma of deeds done in the past you're repaying today. Does it taste good to you?" Liu Rong's face, full of hatred and anger, froze, her heart like being stabbed, violently quivering at its core. The crowd was shocked and couldn't help but turn their eyes toward Liu Rong. Liu Rong, with an angry expression, said, "I don't know what you're talking about. You've harmed Shen Feng, maimed your cousin, and yet you still try to argue." Li Hao, unwilling to play her game any longer, coldly chuckled. "When I was 1.5 years old, you took me to your courtyard and made me take poison, ruining my divine blood. Have you forgotten that incident?" Chapter 143. Upon hearing these words, everyone's expression slightly changed as they looked towards Liu Yurong. However, Liu Yurong's heart trembled with coldness, and she felt a chill, especially under the angry gaze of Li Hao, which made her feel as if her mind had gone blank. She certainly remembered that matter, and it even often came to her mind at night. But how could this child know about it? "What nonsense are you talking about?" Despite the buzzing in her head, Liu Yurong appeared only slightly dazed. Years of experience and meticulous thoughts allowed her to quickly recover, and she angrily retorted, "What does your inability to awaken the divine blood have to do with me?" Since Li Hao had revealed his cultivation level, everyone had come to understand his situation. Furthermore, Li Tiangang had disclosed early on that Li Hao's body was likely to have the divine blood, and they were all instructed to ensure that Li Hao embarked on the path of cultivation. However, when they inquired with Li Hao, they learned that he had not awakened, but the first reaction of the people was to think of Li Hao's mother, the woman who came from the great wilderness heaven. Given the woman's unique bloodline and its fusion with Li Tiangang's, it was very possible that it suppressed the divine blood and prevented Li Hao from awakening. Additionally, the realm of Li Hao's cultivation was so formidable, far surpassing the top prodigies. It was also highly likely due to that woman's bloodline. That was the consensus among the people, since only then did it make sense to them. "You sought a secret medicine from Mount Wuliang to sabotage my divine blood and pave the way for your son, a plot you've been scheming for over a decade. Do you think no one knows?" Li Hao coldly watched her act. "There's a saying, if you don't want people to know, don't do it." Liu Yurong's heart was trembling, but on the surface, she still appeared indignant. Her thoughts raced as she said, "Do you think just because you have obtained the true dragon of the Li family that you can slander others? Do you have any evidence for these accusations?" Indeed, from the side, Lin Wujing spoke up, his voice cold. "Originally, the affairs of the Divine General Mansion were not my concern, but since it involves Mount Wuliang, I must speak up. Mount Wuliang does not possess such a secret medicine you speak of, Li. You are now the true dragon, and although you have not yet completed the succession ceremony, you must still take responsibility for your words. Slandering Mount Wuliang, slandering the Bodhisattva. Even the Divine General Mansion must provide an explanation." Upon hearing his words, Li Hao couldn't help but burst into laughter. "What a Mount Wuliang? What a Bodhisattva? How much do you truly understand about Mount Wuliang, down to the smallest detail? Even now, you support this lad. Is it possible that you were also involved in the affairs of the past?" Lin Wujing's expression changed dramatically, his eyes glaring coldly at Li Hao. Very well, truly worthy of the Li family's true dragon. Spouting accusations without evidence. Li Hao's smile faded as he said, "Since I dare to speak of this today, I naturally have a way to prove it." He looked towards Liu Yurong, sneering, "Second mother, you thought I was too young back then to remember anything. But I tell you, I remember everything. This statement caused Lu Yurong's color to change, but Li Hao turned to look at the other ladies, sweeping his gaze across their faces. I remember when I was 1 year old, ninth lady embroidered a pouch for me. I remember when I was 1 year old, I was nursed by fifth lady. Upon hearing this, Li Wushuang and her brothers couldn't help but look at their own mother in astonishment. But Gao Qingqing was taken aback, immediately turning crimson with a mix of shame and anger, glaring at Li Hao while secretly amazed. Could it be that Li Hao truly remembered what happened when he was 1 year old? They all knew Li Hao was precocious, so such a thing was not impossible. Like reciting treasures from his own family vault, Li Hao recounted the events that happened when he was 1 year old. As Li Hao finished speaking, everyone in the courtyard exchanged glances. These events were long ago, and some of them even barely remembered them, but as Li Hao mentioned them, it seemed as though they recalled something. Could this child really remember things from when he was 1 year old? Chapter 144. The prodigious intelligence of Li Hao deeply impressed all the madams, but they had not expected it to be so miraculous. If it hadn't been for the fact that they were in the divine general mansion, with an extremely acute sense of demons and certain exceptional conditions, they might have thought Li Hao had been possessed by someone else. However, such individuals with extraordinary memory from birth were not unheard of. Therefore, beneath their shock, they couldn't help but turn their gaze towards Lu Yurong at this moment. Lu Yurong's heart was icing over. Trembling within, she realized that this monstrous child must have remembered the incident since he was very young. But the other party remembered it clearly, and yet, over the years, he had always maintained a smile in front of her, responding innocently to her caring inquiries. Even, the child would occasionally give her things to eat, and although they did not taste particularly good, they seemed to demonstrate filial affection. Turns out it was all an act. Lu Yurong had always considered herself to be quite shrewd, but she didn't expect that this child, who had grown up without the guidance of his parents, could actually achieve this extent. Monster. Demon. Lu Yurong was terrified in her heart, but upon feeling the gaze of others upon her, her mind quickly cleared, knowing that she absolutely could not admit to it now, or else Qianfeng's future would truly be ruined. This is your evidence. Lu Yurong couldn't help but scoff, saying, "What a deep plot. The words you speak are full of holes." She looked at the people around her, saying this kind of thing he could easily learn by casually asking Zhao from the mountain and river courtyard. It's not anything special, and you call this evidence? She looked at Li Hao, saying, "You claim that I poisoned you back then. Why didn't you go and report to the senior madam? Why didn't you say anything at that time?" Upon hearing this, people felt there was some validity to it. If Li Hao had been just a child back then and had said something like this, coupled with the fact that he later failed to awaken the divine blood, everyone would naturally have no doubts. But the Li Hao of now, although still a youth, he was no longer a child. If he were 2 or 3 years old, with an innate innocence and too young to understand, his words would carry a high degree of credibility. But the current Li Hao was a young man capable of competing for the title of true dragon. He already had the ability to lie and fabricate. Seeing her quibble, Li Hao said with a cold voice, "Even if I had said something back then, before I started cultivating and before awakening the divine blood, who would have believed a child's words? You could easily claim that the child was speaking out of turn, unknowingly influenced by some servant, and then find a servant to take the fall. But with my parents not by my side, once I exposed this matter, you would surely try to harm me again. How could I defend myself?" Lu Yurong angrily retorted, "After all is said and done, you have no evidence, just creating fabrications with your mouth here." Indeed, Li Hao had no concrete evidence. After all, too many years had passed since the incident, and when she made him take the poison, she was well prepared for the fallout. Thus, despite repeated health checkups over the years, he couldn't detect any problems. Not a single trace left. The only proof he could offer was to use his own memory to verify the truth of his words. But as Lu Yurong said, such matters were controversial. And Li Hao had anticipated this, so he planned to take action first and report later during the true dragon conflict, either to depose or kill his son. Unexpectedly, he was thwarted. He Jianlan glanced at Li Hao and then at Lu Yurong, her eyes slowly turning cold. Li Hao was like a child she had watched grow up, and despite the shock from his performance and words today, she still chose to believe in Li Hao. The other ladies hesitated, their expressions uncertain, with no evidence. The matter became a debate with each side claiming righteousness. Moreover, if what Li Hao said was true, recalling his acts over the years, a chill rose in their hearts. This child's thoughts were too profound. Li Qing's gaze was fixed on Li Hao, but realization dawned within him. His contact with Li Hao was deeper than any of these young ladies. Chest Tao reflects the person, so naturally, he believed Li Hao's words. Qin Hufang had just left seclusion and was not very knowledgeable about these matters. Although she had quietly observed some things over the years, she only had a superficial understanding. Now confronted with this shocking secret, she realized that not only was she in the dark, but even he, Jianlan, who had been managing the 9 courtyards, was unaware. Looking at the youth, her eyes were complex, perhaps showing a certain fondness. Something about the youth always reminded her of Jiolong, making her, against her will, favor him a bit more. You say I wasted your divine blood. When your father sent a message from the frontier pass, everyone learned that he had attained immortality at 23. Seeing the silence in the mountain and river courtyard and everyone seemingly lost in silence and contemplation, Lu Yurong bit her lip and said, before that, who could have known about your father's situation? Or the possibility that you had divine blood awakening within you? Upon hearing this, the expressions of the people present subtly changed. Indeed, unless Lu Yurong had known in advance, but that depended on whether Li Tiangang had ever revealed it to her. In an instant, all eyes in the courtyard turned to Li Tiangang. Li Tiangang's face was sullen, his eyes filled with rage, facing the gazes from everyone. He understood their meaning. Even though Li Hao was his son, he couldn't show favoritism. Having led the Ministry of Punishment for many years, he had always valued the law and order from childhood. Without law, there can be no Tao. Only with strict laws can there be continuity. My sister-in-law should not know about my situation, Li Tiangang said solemnly. Hearing him say this, Li Yurong couldn't help but breathe a sigh of relief and said, at least you, Li Tiangang, have some conscience. It looks like Qianfeng's injury may not have been instigated by you. Could it be that he contacted someone and concocted this story? Li Hao's expression suddenly turned somber, glaring at his father. Have you really never exposed anything in her presence, or anywhere else? She must have known. I heard it with my own ears. How could it be false? Li Tiangang, upon hearing Li Hao's accusation, couldn't help but look at him. At this moment, he too was recalling the past. His attainment of immortality was extremely secretive, and he had not informed anyone except his own wife knew. But his wife had been by his side for many years, and besides, her talent and intelligence were greater than his. How could she have leaked it? Seeing Li Tiangang's silence, disappointment that Li Hao couldn't hide appeared in his eyes. If others didn't believe him, he could understand, but even his father didn't believe him and didn't even have the heart to show any favoritism. But then Li Hao laughed at himself internally. 14 years apart, where would the affection come from? Apart from blood ties, what else was there like father and son? Favoritism? Why favoritism? Could it be he was hoping for familial affection based on blood ties? Talking nonsense, trying to kill Che Feng under this pretense. What a vicious heart. Li Yurong looked at the lone, silent young man in the field, her eyes flashing coldness. Moreover, even if we step back and say this is a dispute between you and me, how can you be so ruthless to your own cousin? Has Qianfeng ever offended you? Li Hao came to his senses. His gaze suddenly became icy cold, staring at her intently. Whether he knows about this matter or not, I don't care. He owes you a debt of gratitude and he must bear the consequences. Originally, I only intended to cripple him, but he made the first move to kill. Today, neither you nor your son will leave. Seeing Li Hao's murderous aura, everyone's faces subtly changed. Lu Yurong laughed mockingly, saying, very well, Li Tiangang, is this the son you have raised, so utterly lawless? Are you just going to let him bully us, a widowed mother and her orphan? Your second brother Feng Ping once took a sword strike for you. Without that sword strike, you would have died long ago. Her eyes, burning with anger, stared at Li Tiangang. If it weren't for blocking that sword for you, causing your second brother to be injured, how could he have ended up dead? Li Tiangang was shaken, his pupils slightly narrowed, and his breathing became ragged. Your son captured the true dragon, and now he dares to be so rampant and insolent. If this continues, I fear not the demons will kill the entire Li residence, but rather he will. Li Yurong spoke these words filled with hatred as if they were meant to kill. Exactly. Everyone was silent, but suddenly a clear voice emanated from the crowd. Li Fenghua abruptly looked up to see who it was, ready to scold, but then he saw his daughter Li Ruming crying and running over, with a bright red mark of a handprint on her face. He couldn't help but change color, asking, who did this to you? Anger was already gathering in his eyes, for he adored this daughter of his to extremes. Li Ruming turned her head and pointed at Li Hao, angrily saying, it was him, he's arrogant and domineering. I simply couldn't stand it just now and spoke a few words. And he hit me. If it weren't for Brother Mingguang and the others being there, he probably would have killed your daughter. Brother Mingguang and the others can testify to this. Hearing his daughter's words, everyone looked shocked and turned their gaze towards Li Hao and Li Mingguang. Li Mingguang was also taken aback, although he was angry with Li Hao. They all witnessed the incident of Li Hao slapping Li Ruming and knew it was Li Ruming who was rude first. Li Hao did indeed act to teach her a lesson, but it didn't seem as serious as Li Ruming claimed. Facing the gazes of the crowd, he hesitated. He Jianlan immediately asked, "Is that so? If you were there, why didn't you stop it?" Li Mingguang bowed his head and said, "Cousin Li Hao indeed acted. It was too sudden and I didn't expect it. I couldn't react in time." But before he could finish speaking, a crisp sound suddenly interrupted him. A bright red handprint appeared on Li Hao's face. Everyone in the entire courtyard was stunned. Turning to look at the person who had struck the blow, it turned out to be Li Tiangang. And this slap was extremely harsh. Even with Li Hao's physique, blood spilled from the corner of his mouth and he staggered several steps backward. Li Hao's eyes widened in disbelief as he looked at the tall and burly man before him. But what he saw was a pair of eyes filled with anger and authority. "You are simply too lawless," Li Tiangang said angrily, "associating with fools and meddling with prostitutes. You've even shamed us by visiting brothels. I don't know how you've been living these past few years. Everyone dotes on you, loves you, and out of respect for me, no one dares to discipline you. Today, I will take it upon myself to teach you a lesson. Only a few days ago, I thought you had become more compliant, reined in your temper, but today, just after obtaining the true dragon, do you think no one can control you anymore?" As he spoke, he took another step towards Li Hao. Li Kingsheng's expression changed, saying, "Tiangang, this matter still needs to be investigated thoroughly. We should think this through, and as for Ruming's situation, Uncle 5, don't interfere. This is my own family business." Li Tiangang did not turn around, but his voice was ice cold. Li Qizheng was taken aback. Uncle Bian Ruxue ran over, her face trembling with shock, trying to plead for Li Hao. Meanwhile, a white figure suddenly leapt out, dashing in front of Li Hao as if to protect him. It was the little white fox. Fear was evident in its eyes, but it still stared directly at Li Tiangang. Its fur bristled, and it bared its teeth, slightly outrageous. "Even this cursed beast dares to be lawless." Li Tiangang, enraged, waved his hand dismissively, and a force swept out, striking the little white fox. The white fox yelped as its body crashed heavily against the courtyard wall, breaking through it and falling far away like a kite with its string cut. Its fate unknown, Li Hao's pupils shrank instantly to the size of pinholes as he came back to his senses. But the next moment, his mind exploded as if struck by thunder, and his eyes turned bloodshot. Li Tiangang. The youth let out a sky-shaking roar, his eyes almost splitting with fury as he glared at the man. An aura as deep and vast as the ocean burst forth from his body, sweeping up a tornado on the spot, sending all the dust swirling into the air. Chapter 145. Whoosh! Li Hao's figure suddenly dashed out, heading towards the little white fox outside the wall. His figure swiftly neared, like a rapidly soaring cannonball, yet it stopped gently like a soft breeze right in front of the little white fox. Looking at the dying little white fox, Li Hao squatted down, carefully picking it up, his eyes filled with sorrow. Over the years, the little white fox had been his constant companion, day and night. They had long developed a bond of master and servant. Moreover, this little white fox was an orphan, with no one to rely on, strikingly similar to him. "Uncle!" Li Hao suddenly looked towards Li Qingzheng in the courtyard and said, "Quick! Save Xiao Rou! Save it!" His voice carried a mix of sadness and pleading. Li Kingsheng's expression shifted slightly, remembering the years when Li Hao would join him in chess, and the little white fox often curled up in the young boy's embrace, keeping each other company. Inside the courtyard were mostly house servants. Apart from him and the other old folks like the second elder, this child hardly had any friends, and even fewer with whom he could bear his true feelings. He knew all too well how important this little fox was to Li Hao. In a flash, Li Qingzheng appeared beside Li Hao, releasing a life force that enveloped the little white fox. He took the little white fox and said, "I'll go find the divine doctor." After speaking, he swiftly stepped out, but as if remembering something, he turned back to look at Li Hao before leaving and said, "Hao, don't act rashly." Upon hearing this, Li Hao gave a wry smile and said to his uncle, "Thank you for saving us." After that, he knelt on the ground and kowtowed resoundingly. Li Qingzheng was momentarily stunned, as if sensing something, and his eyes showed a hint of change. He hurriedly said, I'll go save this little guy first. Its heart meridian hasn't dissipated. There's still hope. After speaking, he quickly vanished from Li Hao's sight. Ridiculous. Li Tiangang saw Li Hao's act and his eyes revealed even stronger anger. It's just a demon beast. If it dies, it dies. What's the big deal? You value the life of a demon so highly yet harm your elder brother and strike your younger sister. It's truly laughable. Li Hao, kneeling on the ground, seemed to tremble slightly. He slowly stood up, the entire sky seeming to grow dark and ominous. He turned his head, his eyes, bloodshot as if weeping blood, staring at the tall and imposing man. That recent palm strike, in the heart of the young boy, did not send the little white fox flying, but rather the child had been waiting for in his heart for 14 years. With that strike, it was killed. Li Tiangang. Li Hao's eyes were blood red as he stared at him deliberately, saying, "From this day on, you and I have no more ties of father and son." Li Tiangang, upon hearing this, became even angrier. "Are you going to sever ties with your own father over a beast? Didn't you just say how I got through these years? It was with it by my side." Li Hao's eyes widened with rage, his voice icy. "In my heart, Xiao Rou is 100 times more important than you." Having said that, Li Tiangang trembled with fury, his eyes flashing with a violent light and intimidation. Good. It's my fault for not disciplining you these years. It's my fault, Li Tiangang's fault. For the Li family to raise such an unfilial descendant, I have shamed my ancestors. The sins I created, I will clean them up myself today. Li Tiangang took large strides toward Li Hao. Chen Hufang's face changed, and she quickly said, "Tiangang, don't be reckless. Hao might have another explanation for his actions. Let's investigate thoroughly before proceeding, mother." Li Tiangang's steps paused slightly, but he didn't turn back, only saying, "When my second brother entrusted his wife and child to me, it was his life that allowed me to live to this day. I can't repay him, so even if what Hao said is true, this life I owe can be considered repaid. But Hao is obstinate. I intended to treat him well, to make up for him, but he has been too disappointing. I cannot indulge him anymore." After saying this, he once again walked toward Li Hao. "Tiangang, seventh brother." The others also called out, trying to persuade him. Upon hearing Li Tiangang's words, Li Hao instead laughed. "This life can be considered repaid? You say it so lightly, but damn it, it's my life. Who gave you the right to use it to repay? He's your elder brother, not mine. You have brothers. I don't even have parents. If you need to repay, use your own life. My life, nobody can take it away, nobody." His eyes were blood red and his aura surged throughout his body, his fists clenched tightly. Li Tiangang roared, "Shut up. Your life was given by me. Without me, where would you be? Then come and try taking it." Li Hao's eyes nearly burst, and facing the imposing figure, he suddenly stepped forward. All the social constraints of father and son, everything was cast aside. Even if the world condemned and reviled him, what of it? Boom. The very ground of the Green Lotus courtyard shook violently. A terrifying force, exceeding millions of pounds, unleashed as his whole bodis meridians opened. At this moment, the raging aura burst forth from his body, uncontrollable and no longer needing to be restrained. Seeking death. Witnessing Li Hao's momentum, Li Tiangang's eyes grew colder, and suddenly he raised his palm. An immense, overwhelming power surged towards Li Hao like Mount Tai itself. "Break for me!" Li Hao roared to the heavens as his aura soared like a rainbow, the Zhou Tian breathing skill spinning wildly, the energy within his meridians raging like a torrential river, and with a fierce punch he lashed out. The vast power was instantly torn apart, immediately dispersed by the force of his punch. The onlookers instantly recognized this as the half-step invincible fist, the secret technique of Li Muxiu. Li Chiafeng, who was helping Lu Yurong by her side, also saw the scene, his eyes revealing shock and envy. Second uncle. Why did all the elders in the family favor Li Hao so much? Chapter 146. Li Tiangang also recognized Li Hao's fist technique, instantly realizing it was his second uncle's style. He laughed angrily. "So you're so arrogant just because of the spoiling from your second and fifth uncles, right? Today, let me cut down your rampant spirit." He struck out again, swinging both palms forward. A golden palm print as radiant as the blazing sun advanced towards Li Hao. Li Hao, engulfed in anger, through his fists, the yin and yang dual pulse erupted, and his chi force surged in an instant, reaching nearly 20 million genes. As his fist swept through the air, a sonic boom erupted, and with a thunderous noise, the fist smashed into the golden palm print, causing the entire courtyard to vibrate. The palm print dissipated, and Li Hao's body, slid back slightly, but he immediately stepped forward abruptly, charging at Li Tiangang like lightning. A look of shock appeared in Li Tiangang's eyes. His recent palm strike was strong enough to suppress the 15 Li realm. Even top geniuses from that realm would struggle to resist, yet it was blocked by Li Hao. Seeing Li Hao countering with a strike, he laughed furiously. Good, good. Good. You even dare to strike at me. Do you also wish to commit fratricide and patricide today, you beast? Li Tiangang's hair flew wildly with rage as he slammed his hand towards Li Hao's fist, intent on clashing head-on to utterly crush the stubborn bone. However, at the moment of contact, his expression suddenly changed. The young man's fist harbored a terrifying power beyond his imagination, even beyond his understanding of the 15 Li realm. As father and son's fists collided, the ground shook violently. Li Tiangang's body leaned back slightly, his feet retreating half a step. While Li Hao felt as though he had smashed into a mighty mountain, the violent force, like a mountain collapsing and a tsunami, rebounded and sent him flying back, his chi and blood surging in reflux with a spurt. Both father and son almost simultaneously expelled a mouthful of fresh blood. Li Hao's injury was not a surprise to the onlookers. After all, Li Tiangang was an immortal, but Li Tiangang spitting blood from an injury. How could that be possible? Not even a grandmaster could harm him in the slightest, let alone someone from the 15 Li realm. The next moment, everyone suddenly realized the reason. Li Tiangang had inherited the heroic spirit of the Li family's ancestors. Earlier, when Li Tiangang slapped Li Hao was also a legitimate member of the Li family, someone within the Oath of Protection. Li Tiangang's action undoubtedly broke his oath, resulting in backlash. That slap had injured both father and son. It was just that Li Tiangang, in his anger, had repressed the serious injury from the backlash, and with everything happening so swiftly, it went unnoticed. Now, Li Tiangang's spitting of blood was likely due to the impact. He couldn't suppress the serious injury that he had just managed to hold back, leading to this result. Very good, extremely good. At this moment, Li Tiangang wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth, his eyes staring at Li Hao with a chilling rage. Is this your ability? Indeed, you have the capital to look down upon your peers. No wonder you're so unrestrained. Committing fratricide and attacking your father, today nobody can stop me. I want to see just how much ability you have. Let me, your father, personally experience it. Li Hao also saw the blood the other had spat out, momentarily regaining a bit of clarity in his mind, but then he felt an even greater urge to laugh. He couldn't help but burst into laughter after waiting for 14 years. He thought he had been waiting for someone to stand up for him, but what he got instead was a heavy slap. Moreover, the other knew that slap would break the oath, but still struck out in anger. Had rather injure himself severely than to teach him a lesson. Is this what father and son are supposed to be? Is he such a worthless son? Come on, you want my life, right? Then come and try. Li Hao burst into loud laughter, but then stared at him with a chilling gaze, his eyes filled with sarcasm. You think you can turn the heavens upside down, yet I am not dead. Li Tiangang was furious, and suddenly his aura exploded. A dense and dazzling golden light spread out from his body, with a golden divine soul bursting forth from the top of his head. This divine soul was brilliant and fierce, like a majestic deity. Clad in armor of the gods, his gaze disdainful of the six desolations, as if he were invincible. What a strong force of the divine soul. Standing in the courtyard, Lin Wujing's eyes were solemn. Well-deserved indeed, for a member of the previous generation of the Li family to be a true dragon. Even as the second choice after Li, who had taken over, he was still terrifying. Tiangang. Qin Hufang couldn't help but exclaim softly, her eyes revealing urgency. She had just come down from the mountain only to witness her own descendants fighting each other. She felt her heart trembling with fear that an accident might happen. Seventh brother. Li Fenghua couldn't help but say, let it be, although Hauer has done wrong, it's enough to punish him a little since you've already taught him a lesson. No sooner had she finished speaking than her daughter Li Ruming pouted, her face full of displeasure. Meanwhile, his wife Wang Xiangru also gave him a disparaging look. Don't interfere. Li Tiangang's voice was ice cold. He is not yet the true dragon of the Li family. Has not yet taken over. If we don't punish him severely now, it'll be too late. This brilliant golden divine soul stood tall, over 30 meters high, like a giant looming over the courtyard's youth. Li Hao looked up and laughed aloud. Come on! His whole body shook, and the fierce power within his head surged, bursting forth with all his might, revealing his soul manifestation in its entirety for the first time. Behind him, vast soul power condensed, forming a grand and glittering figure. A heaven and earth law manifestation slowly took shape, The face of this law manifestation was the spitting image of Li Hao himself, wearing a robe identical to the one he was wearing now, however. In contrast to the imposing general, the young law manifestation carried a scholarly and elegant aura garnered from years of playing chess and painting. Yet, this heaven and earth law manifestation was gigantic, towering over 100 meters tall. Seeming to look down from the clouds, the entire massive green lotus courtyard was like a delicate clay sculpture before this heaven and earth law manifestation. Majestic, profound, and as vast as the heavens and earth, its aura permeated the entire place. Everyone's eyes widened in disbelief at the sight. Even those guests who had just left the divine general mansion and hadn't gone far were forced to stop in their tracks. Sensing the overwhelming aura radiating outward, some commanded their carriages, rushing onto the vehicles to gaze out, while others stood in the streets, turning to look back within the millennia-old divine general mansion. Within those tall walls, and among the countless gazing eyes, only the rooftops of respected mansions could be seen at this moment. A vast golden light could vaguely be seen, resembling a human figure. What is that? Numerous people were stunned, feeling the unrestrained and immense aura from those two forces. Who could dare to be so reckless within the divine general mansion? Is that a law manifestation? Jian Wudao, who walked the streets with his 4 disciples as they were looking for an inn to settle in and wait for Bian Rushue to bid them farewell before they would return to the mountains, suddenly stopped, glancing towards the divine general mansion. His sharp, sword-like eyes seemed to penetrate the high walls and layers of space, glimpsing the massive figure. That golden image was that the young man. Jian Wudao's pupils contracted, and then slowly he widened his eyes as his body suddenly soared up, standing above Qingzhou City, looking towards the divine mansion. Chapter 147. In the green lotus courtyard, everyone seemed like tiny specks of dust and insignificant ants under the watch of the heaven and earth law manifestation. Even Li Tiangang's Tenjiangtal divine soul looked small and delicate in front of this law manifestation, reaching only up to the knees of Li Hao's law manifestation. Such a terrifying spectacle left everyone staring, and dumbfounded Li Qianfeng, who was supported by his mother, had his eyes wide with shock to the point of losing himself, staring in disbelief at this scene. Was this the true strength of Li Hao? He remembered how Li Hao had defeated him with a single chopstick earlier, and even when he activated the power bestowed upon him by his master, unrivaled in his own realm, he was no match for that chopstick. His heart was shaken, unable to believe what was before his eyes. Compared with the stunned members of the Li family, even Li Tiangang's face showed shock and disbelief. Such a scene was unheard of to him. Was this Li Hao's soul manifestation? After returning to the mansion, he had inquired about Li Hao and learned that he had not inherited the soul of his ancestors but instead was said to have inherited the soul of a demon, which was one of the reasons for his anger and dissatisfaction with Li Hao. But the soul manifestation before him, what kind of might could that display if it was simply the fusion of a demon's divine soul? Even his own soul manifestation felt like a tiny boat on a vast sea in its presence. It felt as if what he was facing was not Li Hao but rather the entire world. This feeling, in addition to the shock, also aroused some anger in Li Tiangang. As a father, he was actually sensing an imposing aura before his own son, as if his heart was about to rise with reverence. This was something he absolutely could not accept or tolerate. Motherly love and filial son, strict father and filial son. A strict father and a loving mother, that was the absolute truth in his heart and the iron order of the world. So you do have some skills, no wonder you dared to rebel. Li Tiangang took a deep breath, his eyes emitting an intimidating gaze that commanded all directions. As a warrior invincible among 10,000 soldiers, even though he had been severely wounded due to breaking his heart vow. With his cultivation level falling from the peak of the immortal realm to the early stages, he was, after all, still in the immortal realm. Just as an ordinary 15 Li realm martial artist could easily slay a top-tier divine travel realm adversary, the difference in realms was insurmountable. He let out an angry roar, and suddenly his divine soul shot out from behind him, with countless divine lights condensing in his palm and transforming into a blade of divine might. No matter how tough your wings are today, I'm going to chop them off. Come on. Li Hao bellowed, his heaven and earth law manifestation bursting with dazzling golden light. Inside the law manifestation, countless golden light veins seemed to flow, imitating the great veins of his body, with as many as 98 major veins reflected out. At the same time, his yin and yang dual pulse was revealed and the power of his heaven and earth law manifestation was instantly greatly enhanced. The giant law manifestation raised its palm, carrying the divine might of heaven and earth and slapped down towards Li Tiangang on the ground. However, Li Tiangang's divine soul held a blade of divine might that seemed to burn like fierce flames, slashing violently, and mournful cries seemed to rise between heaven and earth. The massive palm of Li Hao's law manifestation was cleaved open with brute force. The law manifestation's face showed pain. Retreating backward, Li Tiangang's divine soul, wielding the divine might blade, soared to the sky and violently attacked Li Hao's law manifestation. Li Hao was furious, feeling as if his palm were being sliced open. The divine might blade was extremely sharp, and despite his law manifestation's strength, he couldn't withstand it. No good, the law manifestation is too big and its power is dispersed. Li Hao instantly realized, as it was his first time manifesting his law manifestation and he was still exploring and mastering it. Quickly, he gathered all his strength and the law manifestation rapidly shrunk, yet the power concentrated within. Erupting with a might even stronger than before, in the blink of an eye the law manifestation condensed to about 10 zhang in size, similar to Li Tiangang's divine soul, but Li Hao lacked divine weapons. He couldn't form a divine blade, so he had to pick up a divine weapon from the real world. Li Hao's gaze turned towards Rin Qianqian, the young girl holding the black sword box. He was about to summon the famous sword Eternal Night from within it. But it seemed as though he thought of something and looked towards the courtyard. Seeing the old lattice face filled with grief, a pain struck Li Hao's heart as he remembered the earnest and kind look in her eyes when she had bestowed him the famous sword before. If he now took the sword, which was the matching sword of his ninth uncle, and battled fiercely with it, the grandmother would be sad, wouldn't she? With this thought, Li Hao held back and, with a roaring shout, while resisting Li Tiangang's divine soul with his law manifestation, called upon his own divine sword from the courtyard. That was the sharp sword he had chosen from the treasury with his second uncle's company when he entered the divine travel realm. Although it was not one of the world's top 10 famous swords, it was a top-tier divine sword capable of slaying immortal realm great demons. It was enough to deal with the current Li Tiangang. With that call, from somewhere within the mountain and river courtyard, inside a room, a wooden-colored sword box abruptly snapped open, and with a swish it sounded like a dragon's roar and a mighty whistle. A golden divine sword with a round handle pierced through the window pane in an instant, carrying with it an endless aura of sternness, and swiftly flew towards its master's call. The sword light traversed the courtyards and the layers of the void, whistling into the palm of the young man's law manifestation. This ordinary-sized divine sword, as if absorbing the great power of the law manifestation, rapidly swelled in size and in the blink of an eye transformed into a giant sword shining with dazzling golden light. With the sword in hand, the whole world seemed to change color. The brilliant transparent blade illuminated Li Tiangang's divine soul, which was charging rapidly. The law manifestation's face seemed to show a ferocious rage, and with a mighty swing, the sword was slashed forward. With the sword blade's howl, the world seemed plunged into darkness. A dazzling and immense bright moon appeared on the sword, becoming the sole light in the world. The brightness was extremely radiant. The bright moon covered and submerged Li Tiangang's divine soul within it. Seventh brother. Li Xianli's color slightly changed, and he couldn't help but exclaim. In that moment, the might and sword intent unleashed by Li Hao's law manifestation made him subconsciously worry for Li Tiangang, one of the three immortals. Li Mingguang, Li Wushuang, Li Yun, and the others from 3 generations stared dumbfounded at this scene. They couldn't imagine that this was Li Hao's true strength, that this was the power one at the 15 Li realm could wield. Li Sibei couldn't help swallowing as she felt that, if she made a move against Li Hao with her cultivation level of the heavenly human realm, she might not fare well at all. This younger cousin of hers was indeed too monstrously talented, even surpassing the person she had most looked up to during her childhood. Just as everyone stood in shock, the dazzling bright moon suddenly tore apart. A fierce red light pierced through its center, and like a blazing sun, shattered the entire bright moon. Li Tiangang's divine soul held the divine might knife with a piercing gaze, exuding the air of someone who could look down upon heaven and earth. Is this your power? Nothing more than this, Li Tiangang said with an icy look in his eyes. Then he swung the divine might knife again, slashing towards Li Hao's law manifestation. Tiangang. Suddenly, Li Qingsheng's figure appeared as if teleported, positioning himself in front of Li Hao's law manifestation. Shock and anger were unmistakable in his eyes. Shock because of Li Hao's heaven and earth law manifestation. An ancient soul manifestation he had only heard rumors of. It was said that in the distant era before Dayu, a minuscule fraction of martial artists could condense this law manifestation. These individuals did not follow any being as their mentor spirit but instead chose heaven and earth as their mentor. They were the trailblazers of martial artist cultivation, later revered as the teachers of heaven and earth, and thousands of years later, people bowed their heads and called them sages. In other words, being capable of this indicated that Li Hao had the makings of a sage. He had the potential to become a sage in the future. It's been so many years since the Dayu dynasty has seen the emergence of a sage. How could such a prodigy of the Li family face such a situation? Fifth uncle, please step aside. Li Tiangang's eyes were frosty, yet he maintained the attitude of a junior towards Li Qizheng. Li Qizheng said angrily, is there nothing that cannot be discussed properly? With Hao Er's talent, how could you bring yourself to hurt him? What's the use of high talent if he's so presumptuous? At only 14 years old, he dares to commit fratricide and patricide. The higher his cultivation level becomes in the future, the less control we will have over him and the more he will act lawlessly. Li Tiangang said angrily, you're simply foolish. Li Qinzheng couldn't help but rebuke angrily. Hao Er has behaved well in the mansion all these years, never bothering anyone. What need is there for you to discipline him? It's precisely because of your indulgence that he has become what he is today. If I had been around these years, I would have taught him a harsh lesson long ago. Li Tiangang said through clenched teeth. Li Qinzheng wanted to say more, but Li Hao below him spoke up. Fifth elder, how is Xiao Rou doing? Li Qinzheng was taken aback and then quickly responded. Looking down at Li Hao, she's fine. I've protected her lifeblood with the power of immortality. She cannot die and is currently healing. Your father didn't really use his full strength. Otherwise, Li Hao smiled. None of these were important any longer. As long as Xiao Rou is fine, that's good. Fifth elder, please move aside. Hao Er. Li Qinzheng couldn't help but call out. Just let me see how he wants to teach me a lesson. Li Hao said with a smile. Second uncle isn't here. And you still have to guard the ancestral hall? Fifth elder, don't get hurt over this and break your hard oath. Li Qinzheng's body trembled, looking at the smile on Li Hao's face, but a look of grief appeared on his own. Hao Er, rest assured with me here. I won't let him harm you. Fifth elder, the ancestral spirits in the ancestral hall must not be troubled because of this, Li Hao said earnestly. His smile fading. Li Qinzheng's expression changed. He looked deeply at Li Hao, then turned to Li Tiangang and said, listen, to this very moment your son is still considering the bigger picture. What about you? Tiangang, any father, no matter where your son was born, would be proud of him. But unfortunately, his father is you. Hearing these words from his fifth uncle, Li Tiangang's face changed, turning somewhat unsightly, but he admitted that the words Li Hao just said did make him see him differently. He took a deep breath and said, Fifth uncle, you're right. Please step aside. Today's matter is our family affair, and no one else should interfere. Li Qinzheng shouted furiously. Your father died early. Otherwise today he would surely teach you a severe lesson. At those words, the expression on Chan Hafang's face in the courtyard turned a shade paler. Li Tiangang's teeth were clenched, eyes blazing with fury. Fifth uncle, move aside. Li Qinzheng looked at him with a profound disappointment and said deeply, you will regret this. With those words, he stepped out and left the battlefield. Just as Li Hao had said, he couldn't afford to get injured because of this and break his hard oath. Now that Li Muxiu was not present at the mansion, only he was left to stand guard. If he were to get injured at this moment and someone took advantage of the chaos to attack the mansion, the ancestral spirits in the ancestral hall would suffer a severe blow. These spirits were merely wisps of remaining souls and not the divine souls from their heydays. A martial artist of the Four Stands realm could sweep through them. This was why he had spent years sitting in the ancestral hall, not leaving his seclusion, although the divine general mansion had accumulated authority over many years to deter aggressors. Those who coveted it were no ordinary people. You have the awareness to consider the big picture. You're not beyond hope after all. Once Li Qinzheng left, Li Tiangang coldly said to Li Hao. Li Hao started laughing. Then his eyes flickered with a cold light. Enough talk. Let's have at it. Li Tiangang shouted angrily, still so defiant. His divine soul suddenly lunged with the knife towards Li Hao. But Li Hao also wielded his sword. This time not bright moon rising, but endless sea. This was the fourth form and also the ultimate sword strike. Endless sea. Heaven is company. As the sword in the law manifestation's hand gathered its momentum, boundless sword intent seemed to surge down from the highest skies. This sword intent was like tides, and the sword chi was like an ocean, as if the heavens and earth were shrouded in the light of the sword. Such an extreme state of the sword path shocked everyone in the courtyard. This child had attained the 15th realm and yet cultivated his sword path to such a terrifying extent. Chapter 148. Vast sword might enveloped the entire sky above the divine general mansion. The youth with the Dharma aspect, holding a golden divine sword, was like a deity among swords, capable of commanding 10,000 swords to bow down. Inside the courtyard, Bien Rushua looked up, those countless sword shadows reflecting in her bright eyes, causing her to become momentarily entranced. Such sword might, capable of shaking heaven and earth, she had only seen in her master's hands. But her master is a sword saint, a top powerhouse in the Four Stands realm, asking his heart with his sword, extremely powerful. Yet, Li Hao was just in the 15th realm and already possessed such might, his sword Dao actually catching up with her master's footsteps, far surpassing her understanding. In the high sky outside the mansion, guests who had previously left their seats now stopped one after another at high places in Qizhou City, looking towards the glorious battle between father and son within the divine general mansion. Incredulity and shock were written on their faces. They had originally thought that the young Li boy, with the close call of nearly killing the direct disciple of the Buddha Lord, was already peerless in his generation, unmatched at the same level. Who could have expected that the opponent had not even revealed his true strength? The sword tied before them was the youth's true killing move. If this swordsmanship had been used in the True Dragon contest earlier, then Li Chiefeng would not have even needed to enter the arena. With such might, even the few grandmasters present felt an overwhelming pressure coming over them. Their hearts involuntarily beating intensely. That child Jian Wudao stared blankly, his shock surpassing itself time and again. In a brief moment, the youth without a shadow of a sword in his eyes actually reaching such a terrifying level in the sword Dao. Could it be that the opponent was just practicing swordplay casually, without affection, and even without entering the sword Dao into his heart, yet could become the leader in sword Dao? Jian Wudao refused to believe it. It twisted his understanding of the world. In the sky above the divine general mansion, as countless sword tides condensed, following the swinging of Li Hao's Dharma aspect, they suddenly swept down towards Li Tiangang. Like a 10,000-foot-high waterfall of sword shadows crashing down. Li Tiangang's pupils contracted, equally shocked. Although he was a saber wielder and hadn't practiced the endless sea technique, he knew the final move of the sword technique was very hard to master. But Li Hao had mastered it. Watching the terrifying sword chi coming to kill, Li Tiangang's eyes erupted with anger. Was the sun truly intent on patricide? Above his head, his divine soul suddenly lashed out, the radiant and shimmering divine might saber bursting with divine light as he stepped into the myriad of sword shadows. The white sword shadows roared like waves, while that blood-red figure was like a blazing sun, dispersing the sword shadows with each swing of the divine might saber. But the number of those sword shadows was too vast, seemingly boundless and madly surging. Even the divine light of the divine might saber was engulfed. Break for me! Li Tiangang let out an angry roar, releasing his divine might. This was a power that only someone in the Grandmaster realm could wield, and with his divine soul at the level of the three immortalities, the effect of his divine might far surpassed that of the Grandmaster realm, like an emperor descending. Immense pressure blasted out as if waves of sonic energy rippling forth. The vast sword shadows suddenly shattered inch by inch. The strongest sword strike of the endless sea actually broken by his furious divine might. At the same time, under the shock of divine might, Li Hao's face turned pale, his chest's blood chi roiling, blood spilling from the corners of his mouth. In his field of vision, it was as if he was facing a heaven and earth god king. Feeling an urge to offer his utmost respects, wanting to bow down under that overwhelming divine might, but bow down. Blood chi exploded fiercely in Li Hao's eyes. If it had been during their initial meeting, even a single word from Li Tiangang would have pressured him to kneel. A son kneeling before a father. Kneeling for blood relations, kneeling for the kindness his father showed when risking his life to slay a 3,000-year great demon to help him with his blood-melting foundation building. But now, the bond between father and son had dissipated. He would rather die in battle than kneel. Aha! Li Hao roared to the sky, his hair standing on end, a beastly roar erupting from his throat as well, employing the characteristics of the physical body path, tiger press. Although there was no roar, an imposing aura, like a tiger breaking free, surged from his body, echoing a tiger's roar as it clashed with that boundless divine might. Surprise showed in Li Tiangang's eyes. Was that the divine might of the Grandmaster realm? Even though it was ordinary in might, it had already taken shape. He snorted coldly, holding the saber with his divine soul, stepping forward with the intention to completely annihilate Li Hao's Dharma aspect and to suppress him. Seeing that Tiger Press could not stop the other's advance, Li Hao's eyes turned fierce, swiftly drawing upon the many catalogs he had collected previously after the battle in Songyu City ended. He had found quite a few prestigious paintings that were not yet embedded. These paintings included Thousand Mountains Birds Flying Painting, Snow Mountain Spirit Fox Painting, Qilin Steed Painting, Blood Sea Fierce Jiao Painting, Pan Mountain Painting, Shangqi Mountains Painting. Li Hao, now uncaring of selection and without the luxury to ponder upon which particular traits these prestigious paintings could provide for the physical body path, embedded them all into his physical body path at once, instantaneously. The bones and muscles of his entire body seemed to undergo transformation and alteration under some vast and unseen force. Streams of information poured into his mind, all representing the traits brought by each catalog. The effect, similar to Tiger Press, came from not one but 3 paintings. Blood surged in Li Hao's eyes as he successively activated the 3 paintings. Blood Sea Fierce Jiao Painting. A roar akin to a dragon's bellow emerged from within him, the surrounding air seemingly thickened with a rich bloody color, a faint image of a giant Jiao encircling behind Li Hao. The Jiao shadow, 100 zhang long, seemed to be rolling and tumbling in the blood sea, roaring at the approaching Li Tiangang with his divine might. The golden divine soul, although slightly halted by the Jiao dragon's roar, did not stop. Instead, its footsteps quickened a few paces. But then the mighty force of the second painting began to emerge. Chapter 149. Mountain Map. It was as if a towering mountain peak, majestic and beautiful, appeared behind Li Hao, suppressing the surroundings and giving his body a sense of stability, immovable and unshakable. Humph. Li Tiangang's divine soul had a cold expression, and although his heart was shocked, his steps did not stop. What was a mountain to him? In the lands of northern Yen, he had slain countless demons. If there were demons, he'd slay demons. If there were mountains, he'd level mountains. Everything would be crushed under his feet. But just then, a sudden low roar, like that of a cow, echoed. A dark shadow emerged from behind Li Hao, its shape like a mixture of a tiger and an ox with wings on its back, landing on the mountain map. Its eyes were fierce and bloodthirsty, its gaze cruel and gloomy. Staring intently at Li Tiangang, emitting an ancient murderous aura and ferocity, this was a monstrous beast from the great wilderness heaven, Changqi. Its divine might was as if a true monster beast had descended. Li Tiangang's face changed as the blazing divine flames on his divine sword were forced to dissipate, revealing only the shiny blade, with 3 kinds of pressure, together with the earlier Tiger Press. The young man standing in the midst of the battlefield had his hair moving without wind, surrounded by beasts as if he were the king of the mountains, exuding a terrifying power and wildness. Even the Grandmaster Li Tiangang's divine soul couldn't help but stop, slightly dazed by the terrifying pressure, for even a Grandmaster would have to bow in its presence. Was this his own son? The 15 Li realm able to battle Grandmasters. Such talent was so astounding that it could be considered peerless, a source of pride, but his nature was wild and difficult to tame. Li Tiangang's gaze turned icy again, slightly regretting in his heart perhaps he should have taken Li Hao with him from the start, taken him to northern Yen, even if it had been more dangerous to keep him close and watch over him himself. He might not have developed such wildness, otherwise, with such talent, how could he not shine brightly upon the world? Very good, but you've chosen the wrong path. Li Tiangang took a deep breath as his eyes opened and closed, an entrancing divine light burst forth. He no longer showed mercy, his divine soul fiercely gripped the blade, unleashing an extremely tyrannical slash. The terrifying blade force emerged as if it were going to split the entire Green Lotus courtyard and even the divine general mansion apart. Such might was several times more ferocious than the endless sea swordsmanship previously displayed by Li Tiangang. Li Qinzheng couldn't help but change color, shouting angrily, but Li Tiangang, as if deaf to the outcry, aimed the blade directly at Li Hao's divine soul. The killing intent within the blade, like millennium-old ice, carried the power to split the heavens and the earth. Unstoppable, Li Hao's face changed drastically, and even though he had the properties of 3 famous paintings to resist the opponent's divine might, he couldn't block the slash. Without any hesitation, Li Hao swiftly retracted his divine soul into his body, united soul and body, and employed his control of objects' power to dodge at full speed. His body suddenly became 10 times lighter. With the enhancements of the Thousand Mountains Birds Flying painting and the Snow Mountain Spirit Fox painting, his movement speed surged dramatically, yet the slash was fierce, and even as Li Hao did his utmost to dodge, he was still struck. The opponent had suddenly increased speed. While he was trying to evade, with a spluttering sound, Li Hao spat out blood, his body flying backward, tumbling like a broken sack and only stopping after crashing through several walls of the courtyard. The house servants and maids within the courtyard all stood dumbstruck watching Li Hao rolling inside. In the midst of the dust, the young man's figure, coughing blood in a disheveled state, struggled to rise without pausing. Li Hao rushed at full speed towards the outside of the divine general mansion. Although his heart was filled with extreme anger, the difference in realm was simply too vast. Staying here would result in more than just injuries. "Where do you think you're going?" A roar sounded, and Li Tiangang's figure, like a burning divine light meteor, pursued. Li Hao did not turn his head, unleashing his control of objects' power at full speed, fleeing from the mansion. His controlling speed was 40 li in a single breath, and now, activating all his main meridians and releasing the power of the yin and yang dual pulse, his speed surged further by several li. This was far beyond the speed of the 15 li realm, but the whooshing sound from behind was even faster. Li Tiangang had once wielded the true dragon authority, receiving enhancements from various realms in the ancestral shrine, plus being in the 3 immortal realms. Though he had suffered injuries that caused a brief fall, he was still far beyond what the 15 li realm could compare to. With a loud thud, a palm strike came flying. Li Hao was barely out of the divine general mansion when he was struck from midair and slammed hard onto a building on the street. Li Hao climbed out from the scattered ruins of the building, with many nearby people injured from the shockwave, but at that moment he had no time to care about these matters. However, as he rose, Li Hao saw a father and son figure outside the building's wreckage, Zhu Zheng and his father. Li Hao trembled slightly, his mind involuntarily recalling the angry shout he had heard before class. "I know my son is a person, an upright and proper person, not a mouse that spoils a whole pot of porridge. Just because he is not suited for martial arts doesn't mean he's unfit to be a human. Although my son may not be highly talented, he is kind-hearted. Even if he is only in the power passage realm, he is my pride. What right do you have to insult him so?" Li Hao spit out a bit of fresh blood, his eyes showing a self-mocking look. "Strange, why do I remember so much, so clearly, from a stranger's words? Did I perhaps harbor any expectations deep down? Is it the power of bloodlines, or is it the idea instilled by society that father and son should have a deep bond? Or is it the gratitude for the slaying of demons in my youth that loosened my heart? I was truly touched and grateful for the grace I received. Who would have expected that it would cause me such wounds today?" At this moment, a ferocious palm wind descended from above as if it wanted to shatter the entire earth. Li Hao looked up, the wind lashing his face, and as he saw the divine palm above, he saw those angry, icy eyes behind it and couldn't help but let out a cold laugh. Chapter 150. But then he suddenly turned around and sprinted away toward the distance. He had no expectations that his opponent would show mercy. His life was his own, and he did not want to die here. "Stop right there." Li Tiangang's gaze was icy as he quickly retracted his palm print, avoiding injuring the innocent. He then leapt forward to give chase. On the long street and in the sky, father and son were engaged in a deadly pursuit. Ordinary people could not see it, but the terrifying waves of murderous intent from the sky made countless people look up, hearts trembling with fear. Bang! Li Hao's body was slapped down once again, crashing into a building. He rolled over to get up and at the same time flipped open a panel. Was there anything else that could be improved? Was there anything that could save his life? He saw the musical rhythm atlas and immediately embedded several rhythms into the control path. A surge of information flooded into his mind, akin to the cry of a phoenix or the sound of a small reed pipe, and several characteristics emerged with it. But Li Hao quickly skimmed through them, finding none that could help him escape quickly or bring about a substantial improvement. He opened the panel looking for something, but all he saw was a dense array of cultivation methods he had mastered. A plethora of cultivation techniques, but at the moment there were none that could extricate him from the peril. Meanwhile, the figure carrying the might of heaven and earth was already hot on his heels, a vast power looming overhead. "Keep running, why don't you run now? Didn't you think you were so powerful to bully your brother and kill your father? Is this all you're capable of?" Li Tiangang's eyes were frosty as he looked down at Li Hao, abruptly lifting his palm for another strike. Li Hao's eyes were about to split with rage. Looking up at the descending palm imprint, he once again unleashed endless sea. The mighty sword intent spread out, filling the area. Among the myriad sword shadows, Li Hao did not continue to flee, knowing he could not escape. His only choice was to fight with desperation, a battle to the death. The myriad sword lights reflected on his face, but his gaze suddenly became calm. The sea had the heavens for company. What about himself? A trace of sadness crossed Li Hao's heart, but he soon thought of the little white fox who had bravely stood in front of him despite the danger, of Li Yuanzhao who had always trusted him. He also thought of second uncle, old Feng. Fifth uncle. A smile appeared on his face. At least for these past 10 years or so, he had not been a failure. There were still a few people he could talk to intimately. A fierce light appeared in his eyes as he watched the countless sword shadows shatter under the might of the divine power. Though the sword shadows were many, they could not withstand a single blade of divine might. All these years he had possessed numerous cultivation techniques, but he did not have his own path. Where was my path? Where was my final destination? Li Hao thought of the many ancient tales he had recently read at Listening Rain Tower. Most grandmasters had used the cultivation techniques of others as references or natural traits of demon beasts to build their own systems of power. A grandmaster is one's own teacher without a master. They carved out their own paths. They were the masters of those paths. If that was the case, why be constrained by the forms of these cultivation techniques? Suddenly, a flash like lightning passed through Li Hao's mind, and he experienced a moment of sudden enlightenment. He had many cultivation techniques of various kinds, which were beneficial for strengthening his body and cultivation, but they had not been classified. These techniques were the techniques of others, not his own. With his understanding of the Tao realm, he could refine the profundities from some of the mediocre techniques. These profundities were like a path branched from the cultivation techniques, but they were not yet complete. Therefore, he had only half-stepped into the Grandmaster realm. In terms of reference, Li Hao looked at the figure shattering the myriad sword shadows, but his gaze swept beyond, to the vast and cloud-covered sky. Time seemed to come to a stop around him, and the noisy wind quieted down. Even someone as powerful as Li Tiangang, one of the three immortals, was also under this piece of the sky. Within this world, if he needed a reference, why not take the world as a reference and all things as a reference? At this moment, the countless sword moves in his mind disappeared. The numerous confines vanished, leaving only the essence of sword intent naturally. His internal breath began to wander, following a special trajectory, surging and pulsating in his major meridians without his notice. The power surged through his breath seemed to extend into Li Hao's eyes. He suddenly saw a door faintly appearing in the world before him. That was the heavenly gate. Turns out the heavenly gate is omnipresent, not situated between heaven and earth, but within one's own heart. Li Hao burst into laughter, his chest filled with surging breath, and he kicked open the heavenly gate. An immense breath burst forth from within him, rising like a sudden gale at this moment. Li Hao felt like the line from a poem recited in the Listening Rain Tower before. With the winds, the rock rises in one day, soaring 90,000 miles straight up. The door of the heavenly gate opened, as if stepping into another world. He felt extremely refreshed, as though stepping into a brand new world, emerging from the deep waters to the surface. With his skin sensing everything in extreme detail, clear and distinct, falling dust could be discerned, visible to the naked eye. This was an extremely delicate and ultimate control over one's body, and this control allowed Li Hao to delve deeper into his cultivation techniques. As his state of mind broke through, the many previously constrained pieces of information flooded in like a breached dam. All at once new sword moves also emerged behind the swordsmanship of endless sea. The other shore. With a whoosh, the sword in Li Hao's hand emitted a dragon-like cry. As if sensing its master's will, it shone with a fierce light. All these changes happened in an instant in the world of state of mind. Time flowed differently than outside, as though one could have hundreds of thoughts in a single breath, while in reality, there was only enough time to raise a hand, and the recent epiphany entered even deeper levels of consciousness, where thoughts surged rapidly, generating tens of thousands of ideas in a moment, while only a fraction of time passed in the outside world. When the sword rose again, new sword techniques emerged. The other shore was born spontaneously. The figure descending from the sky also charged towards him at this moment, with a palm strike that seemed to suppress demons as Buddha might, aiming for his head. But suddenly, The palm print seemed very far away from him. A sword light flashed fiercely, cutting through the distance between them. This strike seemed to sever the void itself, containing the power of laws.